The Mediterranean sun was setting as I felt Sarah's breath against my ear. "Enjoy your last trip, Charlotte." Her voice was sweet poison. Before I could turn around, her hands were on my back. The deck rail hit my stomach, and suddenly I was falling. 20 feet down into the dark water, while my own son's voice echoed from above. "Now it's ours." Can you imagine being betrayed by the two people you trusted most in this world? What would you do if your own family tried to murder you for your money? I treaded water in that cold sea, watching the cruise ship's lights grow distant, but I already knew something they didn't. Tomorrow, when I returned to that ship alive, I wouldn't be coming back alone, and the person walking beside me would make their worst nightmares come true. My name is Charlotte Whitmore. I'm 68 years old, and until 3 days ago, I believed I was the luckiest grandmother alive. For 43 years, I built Whitmore and Associates from nothing into one of the most respected law firms on the East Coast. I retired 2 years ago, thinking I could finally enjoy the fruits of my labor with my family. How naive I was. This cruise was supposed to be a celebration. My son David had just announced that Sarah was pregnant with their second child. My granddaughter Emma, now 7, would finally have a sibling. I had booked the most expensive suite on the ship, spared no expense. After all, what's money for if not to spoil the people you love? But love, I was about to learn, is a luxury that some people simply cannot afford. The first sign should have been Sarah's insistence on handling all the cruise arrangements. "Let me take care of everything, Mom Whitmore," she had said with that smile I once found endearing. "You've done enough. Just relax and enjoy." She booked our excursions, chose our dining times, even suggested which deck we should walk on each evening. I thought she was being thoughtful. I was being herded. The second sign was David's sudden interest in my will. Just a week before the cruise, he had casually mentioned during dinner, "Mom, with the baby coming, Sarah and I have been thinking about the future. Have you updated your estate planning recently?" I had laughed it off. "Darling, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon." His smile had been tight, forced. "Of course not, Mom. Just good to be prepared." The third sign was the insurance policy. Sarah had brought the papers to me just 2 days before we sailed. "It's just a small travel insurance policy," she had explained, pen already in her hand. "In case anything happens on the cruise." The coverage amount made me pause. $2 million. But she was so insistent, so worried about my safety. "Please, Mom Whitmore, for our peace of mind." I signed it like the fool I was. Standing on that deck tonight, with the wind whipping my silver hair, I should have connected those dots. But sometimes the heart refuses to see what the mind already knows. Even when Sarah's grip on my arm had been too tight during our evening walk. Even when David had suggested we go to the most isolated part of the ship to watch the sunset. Even when little Emma had been mysteriously taken to the kids' club early, despite usually spending evenings with Grandma. "The water looks so deep from here," Sarah had said, leaning against the rail. "Almost endless." Her green eyes had held something I'd never seen before. Something cold and calculating that belonged on the face of the criminals I used to prosecute, not on the woman who called me Mom. That's when she leaned in close. That's when she whispered those words that would haunt me forever. And that's when I realized that the daughter-in-law I had welcomed into my family, the woman I had trusted with my granddaughter, had been planning my murder all along. The push itself was almost anticlimactic, a firm shove, calculated and precise. She had clearly thought about the angle, the force needed. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder, planned and executed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. As I hit the water, gasping from the shock of the cold, I heard my son's voice carry across the waves. "Now it's ours!" Not help, not man overboard, just pure, undiluted greed celebrating what they thought was their victory. But here's what David and Sarah didn't know about Charlotte Whitmore. During my law career, I specialized in maritime law for over a decade. I knew these waters, these shipping routes, these emergency protocols better than they ever could, and more importantly, I knew people, the right people. Floating in that dark water, I wasn't just fighting for my life, I was planning their downfall. If you're feeling as outraged as I was in that moment, subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was plotting against you? Because what happened next changed everything. The water was colder than I expected, but my mind was crystal clear. 43 years of handling crisis situations had taught me one thing: panic kills, but planning saves lives. As I floated in the Mediterranean, watching the cruise ship's lights fade into the distance, I wasn't thinking about drowning. I was thinking about evidence. My waterproof watch, a gift from my law partners when I retired, showed 9:47 p.m. The ship's dinner service would end at 10:30. They would have maybe an hour before someone noticed I was missing. But they had made their first mistake already. They had done this in open water, not at port. That meant maritime jurisdiction, international waters, and a very specific set of laws that I knew better than my own birthday. I began swimming toward the shipping lane. My daily aqua aerobics classes had prepared me better than Sarah and David could have imagined. As I moved through the water with steady strokes, I calculated distances, currents, and timing. The commercial shipping route was approximately 2 miles northeast of where cruise ships typically sailed. If I could reach it, I had a chance. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Think about it this way. When someone tries to kill you for money, they don't just wake up one morning and decide to commit murder. This takes planning, coordination, and above all, it takes a motive strong enough to overcome the natural human reluctance to kill a family member. Sarah and David hadn't just decided to murder me on this cruise. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The insurance policy wasn't the beginning. It was the final piece of a much larger puzzle. As I swam, my mind raced through the past 6 months. David's sudden financial interest, Sarah's increasing control over family decisions, the way they had both encouraged me to make this cruise just the 4 of us, me, them, and Emma. No other family members, no friends, no witnesses except a 7-year-old child who would be too young to understand what she had seen. Then it hit me like a physical blow. Emma, my granddaughter, was alone on that ship with 2 people who had just tried to murder her grandmother. What would they tell her when I didn't come back to the cabin tonight? That Grandma had fallen overboard? That it was a tragic accident? The rage that surged through me was so powerful it actually warmed my body. These people weren't just trying to steal my money. They were planning to traumatize my granddaughter with the story of my accidental death. They were going to make that innocent child carry the false memory of losing her grandmother on what was supposed to be a family celebration. But Sarah had made one crucial error. She had underestimated the woman she was trying to kill. During my maritime law years, I had worked closely with the Coast Guard, with port authorities, and with the International Maritime Organization. More importantly, I had handled cases involving ship-to-ship communications, emergency protocols, and international rescue operations. I knew that commercial vessels monitored emergency frequencies 24 hours a day, and I knew exactly which frequency to target. The Maersk cargo ship appeared on the horizon at 11:23 p.m., right where I had calculated it would be. I had been swimming for over an hour, but my legal mind had been working overtime. By the time Captain Eric Johansson pulled me from the water, I had already formulated not just a survival plan, but a complete strategy for justice. "Madam, what happened to you?" Captain Johansson asked as his crew wrapped me in blankets. He was a weathered Norwegian with kind eyes who spoke perfect English. "Captain, my name is Charlotte Whitmore. I'm a retired attorney, and I've just survived an attempted murder. I need to contact the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center immediately, and I need to return to that cruise ship before my family realizes I'm still alive." The captain's expression changed instantly. In the shipping world, attempted murder was serious business, especially in international waters. "How can we help you, Mrs. Whitmore?" "First, I need you to contact the harbor master at the next port. Second, I need to make some phone calls to people who owe me very significant favors. And third, I need to document everything that happened tonight while the details are still fresh." What Sarah and David didn't know was that Charlotte Whitmore never traveled anywhere without a backup plan. In my purse, locked in my cabin safe, was a letter I had written 6 months ago when David's financial questions first made me suspicious. The letter contained detailed instructions for my personal attorney, my financial advisor, and most importantly, for Detective Raymond Torres, My former client who now worked maritime security for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But that wasn't the surprise I had waiting for them. You see, when you spend 4 decades practicing law, you develop certain connections. People who trust you, people who owe you, people who understand the value of justice. And when someone tries to murder Charlotte Whitmore in international waters, those people take it very personally indeed. Captain Johansson handed me his satellite phone. My first call was to Raymond Torres. "Ray, it's Charlotte. I need the maritime enforcement team, and I need them at the port of Barcelona tomorrow morning when the Mediterranean Star docks. Yes, I'm alive, and yes, someone just tried to kill me. But Ray, they have no idea what's coming for them." My second call was to my dear friend, Judge Patricia Hawthorne, who happened to be vacationing in Barcelona. "Patricia, I need a very big favor, and I need it by sunrise." My third call was to my grandson-in-law, Marcus Chen, Sarah's younger brother, the one person in her family who had always seen through her manipulations. "Marcus, it's Charlotte. Are you still working maritime security for the Spanish authorities? Good, because I'm about to make your sister's worst nightmare come true." As we sailed through the night toward Barcelona, I sat in Captain Johansson's quarters, writing down every detail of the evening, every word Sarah had spoken, every expression on David's face, every timing detail that would be crucial for the prosecution that was coming. But most importantly, I was savoring the mental image of their faces when they woke up tomorrow morning, expecting to play the grieving family members reporting my tragic accident. Instead, they would find me walking up the gangplank, very much alive, flanked by federal maritime enforcement officers and accompanied by the one person Sarah had spent her entire adult life trying to hide from, her own brother, who knew all her secrets. The Mediterranean Star would dock at Barcelona at 8 a.m. By 8:05, David and Sarah's carefully planned murder would become the worst mistake of their lives. And Emma, my precious granddaughter, would finally learn what kind of people her parents really were. The Mediterranean Star slid into Barcelona's port at 7:58 a.m., 2 minutes ahead of schedule. From the deck of Captain Johansson's cargo ship, I watched through binoculars as early morning passengers began gathering on the cruise ship's upper decks, excited to explore their first port of call. Somewhere among them were David and Sarah, probably just beginning to realize that their plan had gone horribly wrong. You see, they would have expected me to miss dinner last night. They would have planned their story carefully. The concerned family members who couldn't find Mom anywhere, who searched the ship before finally, reluctantly, reporting me missing to ship security around midnight. By now, they should have been sitting in the captain's office, tearfully recounting how I had gone for a walk on the deck and simply never returned. Instead, ship security was about to deliver some very unexpected news. "Mrs. Whitmore," Captain Johansson said, approaching with his communications officer. "Your people are here." I lowered the binoculars and smiled. My people was an understatement. Walking up the dock toward the Mediterranean Star was the most beautiful sight I had seen in decades. Detective Raymond Torres, in his Federal Maritime Enforcement jacket, flanked by 2 Spanish Port Authority officers, followed by Judge Patricia Hawthorne in her official robes, and finally, the piece de resistance, Marcus Chen, Sarah's younger brother, wearing the uniform of Spanish Maritime Security. Marcus had agreed to meet us without hesitation. "Aunt Charlotte," he had said during our phone call, "I've been waiting 20 years for someone to finally hold my sister accountable for something. If she tried to kill you, she's going to pay for it." What Sarah had never told David was that Marcus knew about her past, the insurance fraud when she was 25, the identity theft charges that were mysteriously dropped when she married into money, the restraining order her previous mother-in-law had filed before dying under suspicious circumstances. Marcus had been collecting evidence on his sister for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. That moment had finally arrived. "Charlotte, are you ready for this?" Raymond asked as I stepped onto the dock. He had known me for 15 years, ever since I had successfully defended him against false corruption charges early in his career. Raymond Torres was not just a federal agent. He was a man who understood the value of loyalty. "Raymond, I have never been more ready for anything in my life." Judge Hawthorne embraced me warmly. "When you called and told me what happened, I immediately issued emergency warrants for both of them. attempted murder in international waters, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and my personal favorite, elder abuse with intent to cause death. Patricia had been my roommate at Harvard Law School 45 years ago. We had stayed in touch through our entire careers, and she had retired to Barcelona precisely because Spain had excellent extradition agreements for maritime crimes. The beautiful thing about maritime law, she continued with a predatory smile, is that it doesn't matter what nationality the perpetrators are. They committed their crime in international waters on a ship flagged to the Bahamas. That gives us jurisdiction options they can't even comprehend. Marcus was the last to speak, but his words were the most chilling. Charlotte, there's something you need to know before we board that ship. Sarah's been planning this longer than you think. I have documented evidence going back 18 months. Bank records, email communications, even recordings of conversations where she discussed getting rid of you. My blood ran cold. Recordings? She's been planning variations of this murder for over a year. The cruise was just the most recent plan. Before this, she considered making it look like a home invasion. Before that, a car accident. Before that, a medication overdose. Sarah has been methodically researching ways to kill you that would look accidental and leave no evidence. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a crime of opportunity or desperation. This was a systematic, long-term murder plot by someone who had studied my habits, my routines, my vulnerabilities for months. Someone who had been sitting at my dinner table, playing with my granddaughter, calling me mom, while simultaneously planning the most efficient way to end my life. But here's the beautiful part, Marcus continued. She recorded herself planning it. Every conversation with David, every detail of their schemes, everything. Sarah has always been paranoid about having evidence of other people's crimes, but she never considered that her own recordings would be the evidence that destroys her. Raymond checked his watch. It's time. Ship security is expecting us at 8:15. They think we're here to interview the family about the missing passenger report they filed at midnight. As we walked up the gangplank, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced in 2 years of retirement. The thrill of the hunt. This was what I had lived for during my legal career. The moment when justice stops being an abstract concept and becomes a concrete reality, walking up a ship's ramp in official uniforms with legal warrants in hand. The ship's security chief, a professional-looking woman named Captain Rodriguez, met us at the gangway. Officers, the family is in the Vista Lounge on Deck 12. They've been extremely distressed since reporting the missing person last night. I'm sure they have been, I said quietly. Captain Rodriguez did a double-take, clearly recognizing me from the passenger manifest photos. Mrs. Whitmore? But you're the missing person they reported. Yes, I am. And I have quite a story to tell you about why they thought I was missing. The walk to Deck 12 felt like a victory march. Other passengers stared as our official procession moved through the ship's corridors. Some recognized the law enforcement uniforms and whispered among themselves. Others simply sensed that something significant was happening and moved aside to let us pass. But none of them could have imagined the scene that was about to unfold in the Vista Lounge. As we approached the entrance, I could hear David's voice through the door. I just don't understand how someone disappears from a cruise ship. We've looked everywhere. Sarah's been crying all night. It's devastating. Sarah's voice was softer, more controlled. She was acting strangely yesterday, talking about feeling dizzy, mentioning that the deck railing seemed low. I think she might have had some kind of episode. They were already establishing their narrative. The confused elderly woman who had somehow fallen overboard due to her own disorientation. The grieving family members who had done everything possible to find her. The tragic accident that no one could have prevented. Raymond looked at me one final time. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this yourself? I straightened my shoulders and smoothed my silver hair. Raymond, I've been waiting my entire career for a moment like this. When someone tries to murder Charlotte Whitmore, they don't get to control how the story ends. He nodded and reached for the door handle. Wait, I said. I want to go in first, alone. Give them 30 seconds to see my face before you follow. Marcus grinned. Aunt Charlotte, you are absolutely diabolical. No, Marcus, I'm absolutely alive, and they're about to discover that trying to kill a maritime lawyer in international waters was the stupidest decision they ever made. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped into the Vista Lounge. The silence that followed was worth 43 years of legal practice. David saw me first. He was mid-sentence, explaining to a ship's officer how concerned they were about my mental state lately, when his eyes locked onto mine across the Vista Lounge. The coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble floor in a crash that seemed to echo forever. "Hello, darling," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Did you miss me?" Sarah turned slowly, as if movement itself might make this nightmare disappear. When she finally faced me, her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the pure terror that drained all color from her face. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound emerged. For the first time in the 5 years I had known her, Sarah Whitmore was completely speechless. "Mom?" David's voice cracked like a teenager's. "But where were you?" I walked further into the room, noting how both of them instinctively stepped backward. "Oh, I've had quite an adventure since our lovely evening walk last night. Would you like to hear about it?" The ship's security officer looked confused, glancing between us. "Mrs. Whitmore, your family reported you missing at midnight. They said you never returned from your evening walk, and they were concerned you might have fallen overboard." "How thoughtful of them to be so concerned," I replied, never taking my eyes off Sarah's terrified face, especially since they were the last people to see me alive. Sarah found her voice, but it came out as a hoarse whisper. "Charlotte, we were so worried. We looked everywhere for you. We thought something terrible had happened." "Something terrible did happen, Sarah, but not quite what you expected." That's when Raymond, Judge Hawthorne, and Marcus stepped through the doorway behind me. David's legs actually gave out, and he sank into a nearby chair. Sarah's hand flew to her throat in a gesture of pure panic. "David Whitmore and Sarah Whitmore," Raymond announced, his federal badge gleaming in the morning sunlight streaming through the lounge windows. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Charlotte Whitmore in international waters." "What?" David's voice was barely audible. "This is insane. Mom, tell them this is some kind of mistake." But Sarah was staring at Marcus with the expression of someone seeing their worst nightmare materialize. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Marcus stepped forward, his Spanish maritime security uniform making him look older, more authoritative than the younger brother Sarah had bullied for decades. "Hello, sister. I'm here because Aunt Charlotte called me last night after you tried to murder her, and because I finally have enough evidence to put you away for the rest of your life." The security officer looked completely bewildered. "I'm sorry, but I need to understand what's happening here. Mrs. Whitmore, you were reported missing 12 hours ago." "Officer Rodriguez," I said, reading her name tag. 12 hours ago, my daughter-in-law pushed me off the ship into the Mediterranean Sea while my son cheered about their inheritance. They left me to drown while they returned to their cabin to establish their alibi for my murder." Sarah finally exploded. "That's ridiculous! Charlotte, you're obviously confused. You probably fell and hit your head. We would never hurt you. We love you." "Love?" I laughed, and the sound was colder than the water I had floated in last night. "Sarah, you took out a $2 million insurance policy on my life 2 days before this cruise. You've been researching methods to kill me for over 18 months. And last night you whispered, 'Enjoy your last trip,' before pushing me over the rail while David yelled, 'Now it's ours,' from across the deck." David was shaking his head frantically. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. We need to get you to the ship's doctor. You've obviously been through some kind of trauma." Judge Hawthorne stepped forward, her official robes commanding instant respect. "Mr. Whitmore, I am Judge Patricia Hawthorne of the Barcelona Maritime Court. Your mother is thinking with perfect clarity. What she experienced last night was attempted murder, and we have more than enough evidence to prove it." "Evidence?" Sarah's voice was getting shriller. "What evidence?" "Charlotte obviously had some kind of accident or medical episode. She's an elderly woman who got confused and fell overboard." Marcus pulled out a tablet and held it toward his sister. "Evidence like this, Sarah." The sound that emerged from the tablet was Sarah's own voice, crystal clear. "The insurance policy is in place. $2 million. If something happens to her on this cruise, we're set for life. David, are you absolutely sure you can go through with this?" Then David's voice. "She's getting old anyway, Mom. This is mercy, really. And Emma will be better off without her interfering grandmother poisoning her mind against us." Sarah's face went from pale to gray. Where did you get that? From your own phone, sister. You've been recording your conversations for months, remember? Your little insurance policy in case David tried to back out or blame everything on you later. But you made one crucial mistake. You forgot that I installed that family sharing app on your phone 2 years ago when Dad got sick. I've been receiving copies of everything you recorded. The ship's security officer was now taking notes frantically. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to inform the captain immediately. This is a serious criminal matter. Officer Rodriguez, Raymond interjected. This is now a federal maritime investigation. We'll need to secure the crime scene and interview all witnesses before the ship leaves port. David was hyperventilating. This is all wrong. This is all so wrong. Mom, you have to understand, we weren't really going to hurt you. It was just, we were desperate. The house payments, Sarah's credit cards, the baby coming. So you decided to murder me for my money? I asked quietly. Sarah suddenly straightened, her survival instincts kicking in. You can't prove anything. It's her word against ours. An elderly woman who spent 12 hours in the ocean, probably suffering from hypothermia and confusion, making wild accusations against her loving family. Judge Hawthorne smiled. Mrs. Whitmore, you seem to misunderstand your situation. We have recorded confessions from your own device. We have maritime radar showing the exact time and location where you pushed your mother-in-law overboard. We have testimony from Captain Johansson and his crew who rescued Mrs. Charlotte. And we have 18 months of documented evidence showing your systematic planning of this murder. But I wasn't finished yet. Sarah, there's one more thing you don't know. She looked at me with desperate hope, as if maybe there was still a way out of this nightmare. Last night, while I was floating in the Mediterranean, I wasn't just surviving, I was thinking. And I realized that someone who plans a murder this carefully doesn't do it just once. Her face went completely white. Marcus, show them the other recordings. Marcus scrolled through his tablet. These are from 8 months ago, Sarah. Would you like me to play the part where you discuss how your first husband's heart attack was so convenient? Or should I skip to the part where you research untraceable poisons? The silence in the Vista Lounge was deafening. Leave a like if you believe that justice should catch up with people who think they can get away with murder. Because what I'm about to reveal next will show you exactly how far someone will go when they think they're untouchable. Sarah collapsed into a chair as if her strings had been cut. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the feeling of cold water closing over my head while my own son celebrated my death, and any sympathy I might have felt evaporated like morning mist. Marcus, I said quietly, play the recording from March 15th. Marcus nodded grimly and tapped his tablet. Sarah's voice filled the Vista Lounge, clear and calculating. David, your mother isn't going to live forever anyway. She's almost 70. If we wait much longer, she might develop dementia or something and change her will. We need to act while she's still mentally competent enough that no one will question her decisions. David's recorded voice responded, But what about Emma? She adores Grandma. Emma is 7 years old. Children are resilient. She'll get over it. And when she inherits everything at 18, she'll thank us for making the hard decisions. Officer Rodriguez stopped writing and stared at the tablet in horror. They were planning to use their own daughter's inheritance as justification for murder? Judge Hawthorne's expression was granite. It gets worse, officer. Marcus, show them the research files. Marcus swiped to a new screen. Sarah documented everything. Cruise ship safety protocols. Life insurance policies that cover accidental death at sea. Even the specific deck railings that would be easiest to push someone over. He turned the tablet toward me, and I saw photographs Sarah had taken during previous family trips. Photos of ship railings, deck layouts, and isolated areas where someone could be pushed overboard without witnesses. She had been planning this for months, studying every detail like a dissertation on the perfect murder. But the most chilling evidence was still to come. There's something else, Aunt Charlotte. Sarah didn't just plan to kill you. She planned what to do afterward. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Show them the trust documents, Marcus, Judge Hawthorne said quietly. Marcus pulled up legal documents on his screen. 3 weeks ago, Sarah visited a lawyer in Tampa. She had papers drawn up to establish herself and David as Emma's sole guardians and financial trustees in the event of your death. She was planning to control Emma's entire inheritance until she turned 25. The implications hit me like a physical blow. 25? The standard age for inheritance trusts is 18. Sarah requested 25 specifically, 7 extra years of controlling Emma's money. But here's the really sick part. She also had papers drawn up to have Emma declared mentally incompetent if she ever questioned Sarah's financial decisions. I felt the room spinning around me. This wasn't just about killing me for my money. This was about controlling my granddaughter's entire life, her entire future, forever. Sarah had planned to murder me, traumatize Emma with my death, and then spend the next 18 years systematically brainwashing and controlling her while stealing her inheritance. David was crying now, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Sarah said it would be quick, painless. She said you'd never know what happened. So that makes it better? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Sarah finally found her voice again, but it came out as a snarl. You self-righteous old bitch! You have more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. We needed it. We deserved it. You were going to die eventually anyway. Sarah, Raymond warned, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it. But Sarah was beyond caring about legal advice. The mask had finally slipped completely. You know what the real joke is, Charlotte? Emma doesn't even like you that much. She told me last week that your stories are boring and your house smells like old people. She'll get over your death in 6 months. That was when I knew Sarah had made her final fatal mistake, because Emma's voice came from the doorway behind us. That's not true. We all turned to see my 7-year-old granddaughter standing in the entrance to the Vista Lounge, still in her pajamas, her dark hair messy from sleep. She must have woken up and come looking for her family. Emma! David started to stand, but Raymond's hand on his shoulder kept him seated. Emma looked around the room with the solemn expression children get when they sense something terrible is happening but don't understand what. Grandma Charlotte, everyone said you were lost. I was so scared. I opened my arms, and she ran to me, burying her face against my chest. Over her head, I looked at Sarah with an expression that could have melted steel. Sarah, I said quietly, you just called me a bitch in front of my 7-year-old granddaughter after trying to murder me and steal her inheritance. I want to make sure you understand something very clearly. Emma looked up at me with confused eyes. Grandma, why is everyone crying? Why are those police officers here? Before I could answer, Sarah made her final desperate play. Emma, sweetie, your grandmother is sick. She's saying terrible things about Mommy and Daddy that aren't true. She fell off the ship last night and hit her head, and now she's confused. Emma looked at Sarah with the direct, unblinking stare that children use when they're trying to understand adult lies. But Mommy, if Grandma fell off the ship, how is she here now? Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Emma turned back to me. Grandma, did Mommy and Daddy try to hurt you? The question hung in the air like a sword about to fall. Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting to see how I would handle this moment. How do you tell a 7-year-old that her parents tried to murder her grandmother? I knelt down to Emma's level and took her small hands in mine. Emma, sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices. Your Mommy and Daddy made some very bad choices, and now they have to go with these police officers to answer questions about those choices. Are they going to jail? Out of the mouths of babes. Yes, sweetheart, they are. Emma nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her. Then she said something that broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. Can I live with you now, Grandma? I don't want to live with people who try to hurt you. Sarah let out a keening wail that sounded barely human. Emma, I'm your mother. I love you. Emma turned to look at her mother with an expression far too mature for her 7 years. Mommy, if you loved me, you wouldn't have tried to hurt Grandma. Grandma loves me, and she would never hurt anyone I love. Judge Hawthorne stepped forward gently. Emma, would you like to come sit with me while the officers finish talking to your parents? Emma looked up at me for permission. I nodded, and she walked over to Judge Hawthorne, who wrapped an arm around her shoulders protectively. Raymond stood and pulled out his handcuffs. David Whitmore, Sarah Whitmore, you are under arrest for attempted murder in the 1st degree, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." As he read them their rights, I watched my son and daughter-in-law finally understand that their carefully planned murder had become their own life sentence. Sarah was staring at Marcus with pure hatred, while David looked like a broken man who had lost everything that ever mattered to him. But Emma was safe. Emma was with me. And Emma would grow up knowing that her grandmother would literally walk through hell to protect her. As the officers led David and Sarah away in handcuffs, Sarah turned back one last time. "This isn't over, Charlotte. I'll get out eventually, and when I do—" "No, Sarah," I interrupted quietly. "You won't. Because attempted murder in international waters carries a minimum sentence of 25 years, and the evidence Marcus has collected on your other crimes will ensure you never see freedom again." Her face went white as the implications sank in. 25 years minimum meant Emma would be 32 years old before Sarah could even apply for parole. By then, Emma would have her own life, her own family, her own understanding of what really happened on this cruise ship. Sarah would lose everything. Her daughter, her freedom, her future, everything she had tried to steal from me. And I would spend the next 25 years making sure Emma knew she was loved, protected, and safe. Justice isn't just about punishment. Sometimes, justice is about making sure the innocent are protected from the guilty forever. The Vista Lounge fell silent, except for the sound of Emma's quiet breathing as she sat in Judge Hawthorne's protective embrace. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Barcelona's morning sun painting the harbor in shades of gold. But inside this room, we were dealing with the darkest kind of human betrayal. Officer Rodriguez closed her notepad and looked at me with professional sympathy. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to inform you that this ship cannot leave port until we complete a full investigation. All passengers will be delayed at least 24 hours. "I understand completely," I replied. "But officer, there's something else you need to know. This wasn't just an impulsive crime. Based on what we've discovered, I believe there may be other victims." Marcus looked up from his tablet with grim confirmation. "Aunt Charlotte is right. Sarah's first husband, Michael Chen, died of a sudden heart attack at age 34. No history of heart disease, perfectly healthy, but he had just increased his life insurance policy to $500,000 2 weeks before his death." Judge Hawthorne's expression darkened. "That's not coincidence. That's pattern behavior." Raymond was taking notes furiously. "We'll need to coordinate with authorities in Florida to exhume the body and run toxicology tests. If Sarah poisoned her first husband, we're looking at multiple homicides spanning over a decade." Emma looked up at me with worried eyes. "Grandma, was my daddy's daddy my mommy's first husband?" The innocent question cut through all the legal terminology like a knife. "Yes, sweetheart. Your daddy Michael was your mommy's husband before she married your daddy David. Is that why mommy never talks about him? Because she hurt him too? Sometimes children see truth more clearly than adults ever can." "I think that might be exactly right, Emma." Marcus was scrolling through more files on his tablet. "There's worse news, Charlotte. I found medical records that Sarah had been slowly poisoning you too." My blood went cold. "What do you mean? Remember those vitamins Sarah insisted you take every morning? The special ones she ordered online just for you? I had them analyzed by a lab 3 months ago when I started getting suspicious. They contained trace amounts of warfarin, blood thinner, not enough to kill you immediately, but enough to cause confusion, dizziness, and make you appear to be suffering from early dementia." The room spun around me as the implications hit. The dizzy spells I've been having, the memory lapses, the times I felt confused and disoriented. Sarah was systematically poisoning you to make you appear mentally incompetent. If the murder attempt had failed, her backup plan was to have you declared mentally unfit and take control of your finances as your legal guardian. Judge Hawthorne stood up, her face flushed with rage. "This woman is a sociopathic predator who has been systematically destroying lives for over a decade. We need to make sure she never has the opportunity to hurt anyone else ever again." But I was thinking beyond just Sarah and David now. I was thinking about Emma, about her future, about how we could transform this nightmare into something that would protect her and other potential victims forever. "Raymond, I want to do something unprecedented." He looked at me with curiosity. "What do you have in mind, Charlotte?" I want to turn this case into a blueprint for catching other predators like Sarah. I want to create a foundation that investigates suspicious deaths involving recent insurance policy changes. I want to establish protocols that protect elderly people from family members who see them as financial opportunities rather than human beings. Marcus was nodding enthusiastically. That's brilliant, Aunt Charlotte. Sarah isn't unique. There are probably hundreds of people like her out there, systematically murdering family members for money. Emma, I said, kneeling down to her level again, how would you feel about helping Grandma create something that would protect other grandmothers and grandfathers from people like your mommy? Emma considered this with the serious expression she got when thinking about important things. Would it help keep other kids from losing their grandparents? Yes, sweetheart, it would. She nodded firmly. Then I want to help. Judge Hawthorne was already making notes. Charlotte, if you're serious about this, I can help you establish the legal framework. We could create the Emma Whitmore Foundation for Elder Protection, with a specific focus on investigating insurance-related deaths and providing legal resources for families. The Emma Whitmore Foundation, I repeated, feeling something powerful stirring in my chest. Named after the little girl who saw through her mother's lies and chose truth over family loyalty. Emma beamed at me. Really, Grandma? A foundation with my name? Really, sweetheart? Because you're the bravest little girl I know. Officer Rodriguez was finishing her preliminary report. Mrs. Whitmore, we'll need you to remain available for the next 72 hours while we complete the investigation. Will you be staying in Barcelona? Actually, I said, looking around at the faces of the people who had saved my life, I think we'll all be staying. Raymond, how long will it take to coordinate with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division? If we move fast, we could have a preliminary investigation started within 48 hours. But Charlotte, this is going to be a massive undertaking. We're talking about potentially dozens of cases spanning multiple states and possibly multiple countries. Marcus held up his tablet. I've been thinking about that. Sarah kept detailed records of everything, including communications with other people who were planning similar crimes. She was part of an online community that shared strategies for murdering relatives for inheritance money. The silence in the room was deafening. An online community? Judge Hawthorne asked, her voice barely controlled. Forums, chat groups, even instructional videos. Sarah has been both learning from other murderers and teaching them her techniques. She's not just a killer, Charlotte. She's been creating other killers. I felt a cold fury building in my chest that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Sarah hadn't just tried to kill me. She had been actively participating in a network of people who murdered their own family members for money. She was part of an epidemic of elder abuse and family murder that was happening right under society's nose. Emma, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning inside me. Would you like to help Grandma make sure that no other families ever have to go through what we went through? She nodded solemnly. Yes, Grandma. But how do we do that? I looked around at Raymond, Judge Hawthorne, Marcus, and Officer Rodriguez, the team that had come together by chance but was now united by purpose. We're going to hunt down every single person in Sarah's network. We're going to expose every forum, every chat group, every instructional video. We're going to turn Sarah's own documentation into the evidence that destroys the entire community of family murderers she helped create. Raymond was grinning now, the expression of a hunter who had just found the most important case of his career. Charlotte, if we pull this off, we could save hundreds of lives. No, Raymond, we're not going to pull this off. We're going to demolish it so completely that family murderers will be afraid to even think about forming communities ever again. Judge Hawthorne stood and straightened her robes. Then let's get started. We have work to do. Emma looked up at me with shining eyes. Grandma, are we going to be like superheroes? I smiled at her, feeling more alive than I had in years. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be exactly like superheroes. But instead of fighting monsters, we're going to be fighting people who hurt grandparents. That's even better than fighting monsters, Grandma. Because grandparents are real. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Over the next 48 hours, our makeshift team transformed the Mediterranean Star's business center into a war room. Judge Hawthorne had used her connections to secure us unlimited access to communication equipment, while Raymond coordinated with federal agencies across 3 continents. Marcus worked around the clock analyzing Sarah's digital footprint, and I spent my time doing what I did best, building an airtight legal strategy. Emma proved to be our secret weapon. While we worked, she colored quietly at a corner table, but her 7-year-old observations cut through adult complications with startling clarity. "Grandma," she said during one particularly intense planning session, "if Mommy was talking to other bad people online, doesn't that mean the police can pretend to be bad people too and catch them?" Raymond looked up from his laptop with amazement. "Emma, that's exactly what we're planning to do." The scope of Sarah's network was more extensive than we had initially imagined. Marcus had found communications with over 40 individuals across 12 countries, all sharing strategies for murdering elderly family members and making it appear accidental. The forums had innocent-sounding names like Family Financial Planning and Caring for Aging Relatives, but the content was purely focused on murder for profit. "Look at this," Marcus said, pulling up a forum post from 18 months ago. Sarah wrote a detailed guide called Maritime Accidents, Ensuring No Survivors. It's been downloaded over 300 times. I read over his shoulder, feeling sick as I recognized the exact methodology she had used on me. The isolated deck location, the timing after dinner service, even the specific way to push someone over a railing to ensure maximum distance from the ship. She's been teaching other people how to murder their families using the exact method she tried on me. Judge Hawthorne was coordinating with Interpol to identify potential victims. We've found at least 15 suspicious deaths in the past 2 years that match Sarah's detailed instructions perfectly. Elderly people falling from cruise ships, all with recent insurance policy increases, all with family members who reported them missing exactly 45 minutes after the estimated time of death. The pattern was so precise it was chilling. Sarah hadn't just committed attempted murder. She had created a template that other predators were following step by step. But we were about to turn her own system against her entire network. Raymond had gotten approval for an unprecedented undercover operation. "We're going to infiltrate every forum, every chat group, every communication channel that Sarah was part of. We'll pose as potential new members seeking advice on handling difficult family situations." The beautiful part, Judge Hawthorne added, is that these people are so arrogant and so convinced they're untouchable that they document everything. They share detailed plans, celebrate successful murders, and even provide coaching for nervous first-time killers. Marcus pulled up Sarah's most recent communications. 3 days before our cruise, Sarah was mentoring someone in Australia who was planning to kill his mother during a family hiking trip. She provided detailed advice on making it look like an accidental fall from a cliff. "Did it happen?" I asked, dreading the answer. Margaret Chen, age 72, fell to her death from a hiking trail outside Sydney last Tuesday. Her son reported that she had seemed confused and disoriented during the hike. The same poisoning strategy Sarah had used on me. The same careful setup to make the victim appear mentally compromised before the murder. "How many more are being planned right now?" I asked. Raymond checked his coordination notes. Based on intercepted communications, we've identified at least 23 active murder plots, currently in various stages of planning. Some are scheduled to happen within the next 2 weeks. 23 elderly people who were going to die if we didn't act fast enough. 23 families who trusted their children, their grandchildren, their caregivers, completely unaware that those same people were planning their deaths for insurance money. "Emma," I said, "would you like to help us save those 23 grandparents?" She looked up from her coloring book with fierce determination. "Yes, Grandma. How do we save them? We're going to trick the bad people into telling us their plans, and then we're going to warn the police before anyone gets hurt." Judge Hawthorne was already drafting legal documents. "I'm issuing emergency protective orders for all 23 potential victims. Law enforcement in each jurisdiction will be notified within the hour. But stopping the immediate murders was just the beginning of our plan. The real goal," I explained to the team, "is to destroy the entire network permanently. We need to identify every member, document every communication, and build criminal cases that will put all of them away for life." Marcus had been working on the technical aspects of our infiltration. "I've created false identities for all of us. Charlotte, you're now Margaret Thompson, a frustrated daughter dealing with a stubborn mother who refuses to update her will. Raymond, you're David Martinez, a son whose father is becoming a financial burden. Judge Hawthorne, you're Patricia Williams, a daughter-in-law who needs advice on handling family obstacles. The irony was perfect. We would be using their own language, their own euphemisms, to expose their murderous intentions. Emma, Judge Hawthorne said gently, while the adults do this undercover work, you'll be staying with my assistant, Mrs. Garcia. She has grandchildren your age, and she's promised to take very good care of you. Emma looked worried. But I want to help catch the bad people. You will be helping, sweetheart. The most important job is staying safe so that Grandma doesn't have to worry about you while she's working. She considered this seriously, then nodded. Okay, but promise you'll tell me everything that happens. I promise. Raymond was setting up our communication protocols. We go live tomorrow morning. Each of us will join different forum groups and gradually work our way into the inner circles. The key is to appear genuinely interested in committing murder without being so obvious that we trigger their security protocols. Over the next 6 hours, we rehearsed our undercover personas until they felt natural. I practiced being a bitter daughter who resented her mother's longevity. Raymond refined his character as a son drowning in debt who saw his father as a financial solution. Judge Hawthorne perfected her role as a manipulative daughter-in-law who wanted to speed up the inheritance process. It felt disturbing to think like murderers, even in pretense. But every time I started feeling uncomfortable with the deception, I remembered the feeling of cold water closing over my head while my own son celebrated my death. I remembered Emma's innocent question about whether her parents were going to jail. I remembered the list of 23 potential victims who were living their normal lives, completely unaware that their families were planning to kill them. By midnight, we were ready to begin the most complex undercover operation of my legal career. Tomorrow, I told the team as we prepared to get some rest, we start hunting the hunters, and we don't stop until every single member of Sarah's network is behind bars. Marcus closed his laptop and looked at me with admiration. Aunt Charlotte, I've never seen anyone turn a murder attempt into a crusade for justice this efficiently. Marcus, they made one crucial mistake when they tried to kill me. What's that? They forgot that Charlotte Whitmore has spent 43 years making sure that people who hurt innocent victims pay for their crimes. This isn't just about getting justice for what they did to me. This is about making sure they never get the chance to hurt anyone else ever again. Emma had fallen asleep in her chair, her coloring book open to a picture of a grandmother and granddaughter holding hands under a rainbow. I gently picked her up and carried her to the cabin Judge Hawthorne had arranged for us. As I tucked her into bed, she opened her sleepy eyes and whispered, "Grandma, are you scared of the bad people?" "No, sweetheart, I'm not scared of them anymore." "Good, because they should be scared of you." Out of the mouths of babes, once again. Turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow I'm going to tell you exactly how we infiltrated the most dangerous murder network on the internet and turned their own weapons against them. At 6 a.m. Barcelona time, our war room came alive with the soft glow of laptop screens and the quiet clicking of keyboards. Each of us was about to enter a world where murder was discussed as casually as meal planning, where elderly parents were referred to as obstacles and burdens, where insurance policies were treated like investment opportunities waiting to be cashed in through carefully orchestrated deaths. I sat at my designated workstation, staring at the login screen for a forum called Silver Solutions, a name that sounded like a retirement planning website, but was actually a hub for people planning to murder their aging relatives. My hands trembled slightly as I typed in my cover identity. Margaret Thompson, age 52, dealing with a difficult, 78-year-old mother who was refusing to be reasonable about her estate planning. "Remember," Raymond whispered from the workstation next to mine, "these people have no empathy, no conscience, and no limits. They've dehumanized their victims to the point where murder feels justified to them. Don't let their casual attitude toward killing shock you into breaking character." Judge Hawthorne was already deep in conversation with someone in a private chat room, playing the role of a frustrated daughter-in-law whose father-in-law was becoming increasingly expensive to maintain. The casual cruelty of the language made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to focus on the mission. Marcus was monitoring all our communications from a central hub, ready to alert us if anyone became suspicious of our questions or if we accidentally revealed our true identities. Emma was safely with Mrs. Garcia, probably having breakfast and blissfully unaware that her grandmother was pretending to be a potential murderer to catch actual murderers. My first post in the Silver Solutions forum was carefully crafted to sound like someone testing the waters. New here. Friend recommended this group. Dealing with elderly mother who's becoming problematic. Medical expenses mounting, refuses to move to care facility. Very stubborn about changing will. Looking for advice on handling difficult situations. Within 30 minutes, I had received 7 private messages offering sympathy and practical solutions. The responses ranged from suggestions about accidental medication overdoses to detailed instructions for staging falls that would appear natural but cause fatal injuries. One message made my blood run cold. Hi, Margaret. Welcome to the group. I'm Sandra. That's my online name, not my real one, obviously. I just went through something similar with my stubborn mother-in-law last month. She was being so unreasonable about everything. Medical costs, living arrangements, family finances. I finally had to take decisive action during our family cruise. It was actually easier than I expected, and now everyone's so much better off. Happy to share details privately if you're serious about solving your problem. Sandra. Sarah was still actively recruiting new victims even while sitting in a Barcelona jail cell awaiting trial for attempted murder. She was using the ship's limited internet access to continue mentoring potential killers, completely unaware that her own attempted victim was reading every word she wrote. I typed back carefully. Sandra, your situation sounds exactly like mine. I'd love to hear more about how you handled things. My mother is also causing financial stress for the whole family, and I'm getting desperate. Her response came back within minutes. Let's move to private chat. What I did requires very specific planning, but it's completely foolproof if you follow the steps exactly. The key is making sure there are no witnesses and that everything looks like natural causes or an accident. Over the next 4 hours, Sarah provided me with a detailed tutorial on maritime murder. She described the exact location on the ship where she had tried to kill me, the optimal timing to avoid security cameras, and even specific techniques for pushing someone overboard in a way that would maximize the distance from the ship and minimize the chances of rescue. But the most chilling part was her casual attitude toward Emma's future trauma. The only tricky part is dealing with any grandchildren afterward, she wrote. They might be upset for a while, but kids are resilient. Just tell them it was an accident and that Grandma is in a better place now. They'll get over it quickly, especially once they realize how much better life is with the inheritance money. I had to step away from my computer for a moment to compose myself. This woman had tried to murder me, planned to traumatize my granddaughter, and was now casually advising other people to do the same thing to their own families. Raymond caught my eye from across the room and nodded toward his own screen. He was deep in conversation with someone who was planning to kill their father during a family camping trip in 2 weeks. Judge Hawthorne was exchanging messages with a woman in Germany who wanted advice on making her mother-in-law's heart medication accidentally interact with other substances. But Marcus had found something even more disturbing. Charlotte, come look at this. I walked over to his central monitoring station, where he had multiple chat windows open across 3 screens. What am I looking at? Sarah isn't just advising individual murders. She's organized them into a coordinated network. Look at these timestamps. She's scheduled consultation sessions with different people at specific times throughout the week. She's treating mass murder like a business. The evidence was overwhelming. Sarah had created what amounted to a murder-for-hire consulting service, where she provided personalized advice to people planning to kill their elderly relatives. She charged fees ranging from $500 to $5,000, depending on the complexity of the murder being planned. How many active consultations does she have scheduled? Marcus scrolled through her calendar. 47 appointments over the next 6 weeks. Each one represents someone planning to murder a family member. 47 elderly people who were going to die unless we stopped this network immediately. Judge Hawthorne looked up from her own conversations. It's worse than that. The people Sarah is consulting with are also recruiting others. This isn't just a network. It's a pyramid scheme where the product being sold is instruction on how to commit family murder. Raymond was coordinating with law enforcement agencies worldwide. We've identified murder plots in progress in 14 countries. Local authorities are moving to protect the immediate victims, but we need to keep our undercover operation running to identify all the members. I returned to my conversation with Sarah, who was now offering to walk me through a practice scenario to help me plan my mother's murder more effectively. Margaret, the key is to start with small tests, she wrote. Try giving your mother medication that will make her confused or disoriented. Then you can point to those episodes later as evidence that she was becoming mentally incompetent before her accident. It establishes a pattern that makes the death look more natural. She was describing exactly what she had done to me with the poisoned vitamins, the systematic poisoning designed to make me appear mentally compromised before the murder attempt. How long should I do that before moving to the final step? I typed back. At least 3 months of documented confusion episodes. Get her doctor to note them in her medical records. Maybe even suggest to other family members that you're worried about her mental state. That way, when she has her accident, everyone will remember that she'd been acting strangely lately. The premeditation was staggering. Sarah had spent months poisoning me, documenting my resulting symptoms, and building a medical record that would support her story that I had fallen overboard due to mental confusion. But now, her own detailed instructions were going to be the evidence that destroyed her and her entire network. Sandra, this is incredibly helpful. I think I'm ready to start the preparation phase with my mother, but I want to make sure I do everything correctly. Could you put me in touch with others who have successfully completed similar projects? Her response was exactly what we had hoped for. Absolutely. Let me introduce you to our wider community. We have success stories from all over the world, and everyone is very supportive of newcomers who are serious about solving their family problems. Within an hour, Sarah had introduced me to 12 other murderers who were eager to share their techniques and celebrate their successful kills. Each conversation provided evidence of specific crimes, detailed confessions, and proof of ongoing conspiracies to commit murder. By the end of the day, our team had documented over 300 individual crimes spanning 7 years. We had recorded confessions, collected evidence, and identified victims and perpetrators across 4 continents. But most importantly, we had prevented 47 murders that were scheduled to happen in the coming weeks. As evening fell over Barcelona, I closed my laptop and looked around at my team of unlikely heroes. Tomorrow, we spring the trap, and when we're done, every single member of this network will be facing life in prison. Emma came running into the war room, having spent the day with Mrs. Garcia. Grandma, did you catch the bad people today? We're getting closer, sweetheart. Tomorrow, we're going to catch all of them at once. She hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Grandma. You're the best superhero ever. If only she knew that her grandmother had just spent 8 hours pretending to plan a murder in order to save 47 lives. Sometimes being a superhero requires getting your hands very dirty indeed. The trap was set for 9 a.m. the next morning. Sarah had scheduled a group consultation call where she would simultaneously advise 12 different people on their murder plans. A conference call that would provide enough evidence to prosecute the entire network under international conspiracy laws. What Sarah didn't know was that 11 of the 12 participants were undercover law enforcement officers from 6 different countries, all coordinated by Raymond and Judge Hawthorne. The 12th participant was me, still playing the role of Margaret Thompson, the frustrated daughter planning her mother's death. Emma sat quietly in the corner of our war room, coloring in a new book Mrs. Garcia had given her. She had asked to be present when we caught the bad people, and Judge Hawthorne had agreed, reasoning that Emma deserved to see justice being served for the attempt on her grandmother's life. At exactly 9 a.m., Sarah's voice came through our speakers with cheerful efficiency. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our group consultation session. I'm so excited to help all of you solve your family problems permanently. The casual way she said, solve your family problems permanently, while discussing murder, made everyone in the room exchange horrified glances. But we had to maintain our cover characters. Today we have Margaret from Florida dealing with a stubborn mother, David from Texas whose father is becoming expensive, Patricia from California with difficult in-law issues. Sarah went down the list, introducing each of us by our cover identities while describing our supposed murder motivations like she was discussing a book club. Let's start with you, Margaret, Sarah said, addressing me directly. Tell the group about your mother's situation. I took a deep breath and launched into the character I had perfected over 3 days of preparation. My mother is 78 and becoming impossible to manage. She's burning through her savings on medical expenses, refuses to move to a cheaper living situation, and she's threatening to leave everything to charity instead of family. I need to act soon, before she wastes the entire inheritance." "Excellent setup," Sarah responded approvingly. "Margaret, have you started the preliminary confusion treatments we discussed?" "Preliminary confusion treatments?" one of the other participants asked. This was Agent Maria Santos from Spanish National Police, playing the role of a daughter-in-law from Madrid. Sarah launched into a detailed explanation of systematic poisoning designed to make elderly victims appear mentally incompetent. As she spoke, Raymond was recording every word while simultaneously coordinating with law enforcement agencies worldwide to arrest the network members who weren't participating in this call. "The beauty of the confusion treatments," Sarah continued, "is that they serve multiple purposes. First, they make your victim appear unreliable if they ever suspect what you're planning. Second, they establish a medical record of declining mental capacity. Third, they make the victim easier to manipulate during the final phase." Judge Hawthorne, playing Patricia from California, asked the question we needed for legal purposes. "Sarah, when you say final phase, you mean the actual murder, correct?" "Well, we don't use that word in our community," Sarah laughed. "We prefer to call it transitioning or helping them move on. But yes, the final step where they have their accident and you inherit everything." Perfect. She had just admitted to murder conspiracy in front of witnesses from 6 countries, with full digital recording as evidence. But Sarah wasn't finished. "Let me share some success stories to inspire all of you. Just last week, I helped Robert from Australia transition his mother during a hiking trip. Beautiful cliffside location, looked completely natural. Robert inherited $2.3 million, and the whole thing was ruled accidental death." Agent James Morrison from Australian Federal Police, who was playing Robert, spoke up. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you again for that advice. The technique you taught me worked perfectly." What Sarah didn't realize was that the real Robert Collins was sitting in an Australian jail cell, arrested yesterday morning for his mother's murder based on evidence Agent Morrison had collected during his undercover work. For the next hour, Sarah provided detailed instructions to our group on various murder techniques. Maritime murders, like she had attempted on me. Hiking accidents involving strategic pushes off cliffs. Medication tampering that would cause fatal interactions. Even arson techniques designed to kill victims while they slept. Emma looked up from her coloring book during a particularly disturbing description of how to set a house fire that would look accidental. "Grandma," she whispered, "is that lady really teaching people how to hurt their grandparents?" I nodded sadly. Emma returned to her coloring, but I noticed she was now drawing stick figures of police officers arresting bad people. Sarah was reaching the climax of her presentation. "The most important thing to remember is that we're providing a service to society. These elderly people are drains on family resources, healthcare systems, and social services. By helping them transition peacefully, we're actually being merciful." The rationalization was breathtaking. She had convinced herself that mass murder was an act of kindness. "Now," Sarah continued, "let's discuss pricing for personalized consultation services. Basic murder planning starts at $500. Complex scenarios like maritime accidents or inheritance manipulation require premium pricing of $3,000. And if you want ongoing support through the entire process, including post-murder counseling to help you appear appropriately grieved, that's our platinum package at $5,000. She was literally selling murder instruction packages with customer service tiers. Raymond looked at his watch and nodded to Judge Hawthorne. It was time to spring the trap. "Sarah," I said, my voice suddenly losing all pretense of the Margaret Thompson character. "This is Charlotte Whitmore." The silence on the call was deafening. "That's impossible," Sarah finally whispered. "You're dead. I pushed you off the ship. David saw you go overboard." "I did go overboard, Sarah, but I survived, and I've spent the last 4 days documenting every crime you've committed and every murder you've helped plan. This is some kind of trick. This isn't real." Judge Hawthorne spoke next, her official voice cutting through Sarah's denial. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Judge Patricia Hawthorne of the Barcelona Maritime Court. This conversation has been recorded as evidence in multiple international murder conspiracy cases. Everyone participating in this call is under arrest. Raymond coordinated the simultaneous arrests through his communication system. All units, execute arrest warrants now. Over the next 10 minutes, we listened as law enforcement officers in 6 countries arrested network members in real time during the conference call. Agent Morrison in Australia. Robert Collins, you are under arrest for the murder of Margaret Collins. Agent Santos in Spain. Carmen Rodriguez, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Agent Thompson in Germany. Klaus Muller, you are under arrest for the murder of your mother-in-law. One by one, Sarah heard her entire network being destroyed. But the final blow came from Marcus, who had been monitoring Sarah's location through the ship's communication system. Sarah, this is Marcus Chen, your brother. Spanish maritime police are outside your jail cell right now with additional charges of conspiracy to commit mass murder, operating a criminal enterprise, and accessory to 47 counts of homicide. Marcus, how could you do this to your own sister? The same way you tried to murder your own mother-in-law, Sarah. The only difference is that I'm stopping crimes instead of committing them. Emma stood up from her coloring table and walked over to my microphone. Sarah, this is Emma. You tried to hurt my grandma, and now the police are going to make sure you can never hurt anyone else's grandma ever again. Sarah's response was a sound I will never forget. A keening wail of rage and despair as she finally understood that her entire criminal empire had collapsed and that she would spend the rest of her life in prison. Judge Hawthorne ended the call and looked around our makeshift war room with satisfaction. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past 4 days, we have prevented 47 murders, documented over 300 crimes, and dismantled the largest family murder network in international law enforcement history. Emma ran to me and hugged me tightly. Grandma, did we save all the grandparents? Yes, sweetheart. We saved all of them. Good. Now can we go home? I want to show you the picture I drew of you being a superhero. I picked her up and looked at her drawing, a stick figure with silver hair standing on a boat, surrounded by police officers, while bad people sat behind bars in the background. Emma, that's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen. It's what really happened, isn't it, Grandma? You saved everyone. No, sweetheart. We saved everyone, all of us together. And that was the truth. It had taken a retired lawyer, a federal agent, a Spanish judge, a maritime security officer, and one very brave 7-year-old girl to bring down a network of family murderers. But we weren't finished yet. Justice demanded more than just arrests. Share my story with someone who needs to know that no matter how old you are, no matter how vulnerable you seem, no matter how much someone underestimates you, you are never powerless if you refuse to give up. 3 weeks later, I stood in the Barcelona courthouse wearing my best navy suit, holding Emma's hand as we prepared to face David and Sarah one final time. The media attention had been overwhelming. Grandmother survives murder attempt, destroys international killing network had made headlines worldwide. But today wasn't about publicity. Today was about justice. The courtroom was packed with families of Sarah's victims, law enforcement officers from 6 countries, and reporters from major news outlets. Judge Hawthorne sat at the bench in her official capacity, while Raymond occupied the prosecutor's table alongside Spanish and international legal teams. Emma wore a small blue dress and sat quietly beside me in the front row, occasionally squeezing my hand when she needed reassurance. She had insisted on being present for the sentencing, saying, "I want to see the bad people go to jail forever, Grandma." David entered first, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit, his face gaunt from 3 weeks in custody. When he saw Emma, his eyes filled with tears, but she looked right through him, as if he were a stranger. The little girl who once adored her daddy had seen him celebrate her grandmother's attempted murder. That trust, once broken, could never be repaired. Sarah came next, and the transformation was shocking. The polished, manipulative woman I had known was gone, replaced by someone who looked hollowed out, defeated. She had aged years in 3 weeks, her blonde hair now showing gray roots, her expensive makeup replaced by the harsh reality of prison life. Judge Hawthorne called the court to order. We are here today for the sentencing of David James Whitmore and Sarah Michelle Whitmore in the matter of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, insurance fraud, and operation of a criminal enterprise resulting in multiple homicides across international boundaries. The lead prosecutor, A sharp-eyed woman named Elena Vasquez stood to address the court. Your Honor, the evidence shows that the defendants didn't just attempt to murder Charlotte Whitmore. They operated a sophisticated criminal network that resulted in the confirmed deaths of 23 elderly individuals and the planned murders of 47 more. She clicked a remote, and a screen displayed photos of Sarah's victims, elderly men and women who had trusted their families and died for that trust. Emma's grip on my hand tightened as she stared at the faces of grandparents who looked just like me. The defendant, Sarah Whitmore, charged fees ranging from $500 to $5,000 to teach family members how to murder their elderly relatives. She provided detailed instructions on poisoning, staged accidents, and psychological manipulation techniques designed to make victims appear mentally incompetent before their murders. The prosecutor turned to face David and Sarah directly. But perhaps most disturbing is the evidence of how they planned to traumatize their own 7-year-old daughter by making her witness what she believed was her grandmother's accidental death, then inherit money built on that traumatic lie. Emma stood up suddenly. "Can I talk to the judge, Grandma?" Judge Hawthorne heard her and smiled gently. "Emma, would you like to address the court?" Emma walked to the witness stand with the composure of someone far older than 7. "Judge Hawthorne, I want to tell everyone what my mommy and daddy did." The courtroom fell completely silent. "They tried to kill my grandma because they wanted her money. But Grandma is smart and brave and she caught them. Now I live with Grandma and I'm happy. But I'm sad for all the other grandparents who got killed by their families. That's not fair." She looked directly at David and Sarah. "Daddy, you used to read me bedtime stories about good guys and bad guys. Now you're the bad guy. And Mommy, you used to tell me that families should love each other, but you tried to hurt the person I love most." David was sobbing openly now. "Emma, baby, I'm so sorry. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you." Emma's response was devastating in its simplicity. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have tried to kill Grandma. Grandma loves me, and she would never hurt anyone I love." She turned back to Judge Hawthorne. "I think they should go to jail forever so they can't hurt any more grandparents. And I think all the money they wanted to steal should go to help other grandparents stay safe." The wisdom and strength in that small voice brought tears to eyes throughout the courtroom. Judge Hawthorne nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Emma. Your statement will be part of the official record." As Emma returned to her seat beside me, the prosecutor continued with the evidence. Marcus took the stand to testify about Sarah's pattern of behavior dating back to her first husband's suspicious death. Medical experts testified about the systematic poisoning she had used on me. Technology specialists explained how her online murder network had operated. But the most damning evidence was Sarah's own recordings and communications. Her casual discussions of murder techniques, her celebration of successful kills, her businesslike approach to selling death. It was all played back in her own voice. When it came time for David to speak, he stood trembling at the defendant's table. "Your Honor, I know what we did was unforgivable. I was drowning in debt, scared about the future, and Sarah convinced me that Mom was going to live for decades while we lost everything. She made it sound like we were just speeding up the inevitable." His voice broke completely. "But when I heard Mom hit that water, when I realized what we had actually done, I wanted to die. I wanted to jump in after her. Sarah had to physically hold me back from the railing." He looked at Emma, who stared back at him with no emotion at all. "Emma, sweetie, I know you can't forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But please know that your daddy loved you even when he was making the worst decisions of his life." Emma's response was quiet but clear. "Love isn't just words, Daddy. Love is actions, and your actions tried to hurt Grandma." Sarah's statement was very different. She stood defiant, unrepentant, and angry. "I'm not going to pretend to be sorry for trying to solve a problem that was destroying my family's future. Charlotte Whitmore is a selfish old woman who was hoarding wealth while her son's family struggled financially." The courtroom erupted in outraged murmurs, but Sarah continued. "I provided a service to people who were trapped in impossible situations with elderly relatives who refused to be reasonable about end-of-life planning. Sometimes mercy requires difficult decisions." Judge Hawthorne's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Mrs. Whitmore, you have shown no remorse for attempting to murder your mother-in-law, no compassion for the 23 confirmed victims of your murder network, and no understanding of the trauma you plan to inflict on your own daughter. Your statement has been noted. The sentencing was swift and comprehensive. David James Whitmore, I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for attempted murder in the first degree, plus additional concurrent sentences for conspiracy and elder abuse. David collapsed into his chair, finally understanding that he would not see freedom until he was in his 70s. Sarah Michelle Whitmore, I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit multiple homicides, operation of a criminal enterprise, and accessory to 23 confirmed murders. Sarah's defiance finally cracked. Life? You can't give me life. I have a daughter. Emma needs her mother. Emma stood up again. No, I don't. I have Grandma. She's all the family I need. As the bailiffs led David and Sarah away in shackles, Emma waved goodbye. Not sadly, not angrily, but with the matter-of-fact finality of someone closing a book she was finished reading. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us, but I had only one statement. The Emma Whitmore Foundation for Elder Protection will ensure that no other families go through what we experienced. We will investigate suspicious deaths, provide legal resources for threatened elderly individuals, and educate families about the warning signs of elder abuse. Emma tugged on my jacket. Grandma, can we go home now? I want to show you the new picture I drew. What did you draw this time, sweetheart? You and me and our new house with the big garden. And there are no bad people anywhere in the picture. As we walked away from the courthouse toward our new life together, I realized that Sarah had been right about one thing. This experience had changed everything about our family's future. She just hadn't understood that the change would be Emma and me building something beautiful from the ashes of her cruelty. Remember what I learned on my journey. It's never too late to fight for justice, and you're never too old to start over. Leave a like if you believe that families should protect each other, not prey on each other. 6 months after the trial, Emma and I stood in the garden of our new house in Sarasota, Florida, watching as workers installed a bronze plaque by the front gate. The Emma Whitmore Foundation for Elder Protection, headquarters. Grandma, do you think the foundation will really help people? Emma asked, now 8 years old, and somehow both wiser and more innocent than when this nightmare began. I know it will, sweetheart. We've already prevented 12 murders in the past 3 months. The foundation had grown beyond anything I had imagined. Raymond had taken early retirement from the FBI to serve as our director of investigations. Judge Hawthorne consulted on legal matters from her new home in Barcelona. Marcus headed our technology division, monitoring online forums for potential murder networks. And Emma, our youngest board member, reviewed all our educational materials to make sure children could understand the warning signs of family abuse. Our first major success had come just 2 weeks after the trial. A 65-year-old woman in Oregon called our hotline after her daughter-in-law started insisting she update her will and take special vitamins. Within 24 hours, we had connected her with local law enforcement, analyzed the vitamins, which contained blood thinners, and prevented what would have been a carefully orchestrated murder disguised as an accident. Emma looked up at me with those serious dark eyes. Grandma, do you ever miss Mommy and Daddy? It was a question she asked periodically, and I always answered honestly. I miss who I thought they were, Emma. But the people who tried to hurt us weren't really the Mommy and Daddy you deserved. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad they can't hurt any more grandparents, and I'm glad we can help the scared grandparents now. The scared grandparents. That's what Emma called the people who contacted our foundation. Elderly individuals who sensed something was wrong with their families but didn't know who to trust or where to turn. Our phone rang 15 to 20 times a day. Adult children pressuring parents to sign new wills, sudden interest in life insurance policies, family members encouraging dangerous activities or medications, strange accidents that seemed too convenient. We investigated every call, and our success rate was terrifying. Nearly 60% of our cases involved legitimate murder plots. Emma's voice interrupted my thoughts. Grandma, Mrs. Patterson is here for her interview. Mrs. Patterson was a 73-year-old widow whose son-in-law had been pushing her to go on a cruise, the same cruise line where Sarah had tried to kill me. Her daughter had recently increased her life insurance and started talking about how expensive her mother's medical care was becoming. The patterns were always the same. The language was always familiar. Sarah's network had been destroyed, but the mentality that created it was still out there, still turning families into predators. "Send her in, sweetheart." As Mrs. Patterson told her story, Emma sat quietly in the corner, coloring pictures of police officers protecting elderly people. She had become our secret weapon. Children trusted other children, and Emma could often get young victims to reveal things they wouldn't tell adults. After documenting Mrs. Patterson's case and connecting her with protective services, I found Emma on the back porch, staring at the sunset. "Penny for your thoughts, little one. Grandma, will there always be bad people who try to hurt their families for money?" The question broke my heart, because I knew the answer. Probably, Emma, but there will also always be good people who fight to protect the innocent. People like us. She smiled and took my hand. Then we'll just have to keep being the good people. Out of the mouths of babes, forever and always. That night, as I tucked Emma into her bed in our safe, beautiful home, she said her prayers the same way she had every night since the trial. "Thank you for keeping Grandma safe, and please help us save all the scared grandparents tomorrow." The Emma Whitmore Foundation had saved 43 lives in 6 months, but more importantly, it had given one little girl the power to transform her trauma into a force for protecting others. 1 year later, I received a phone call that brought everything full circle. The voice on the other end was trembling but determined. "Mrs. Whitmore? My name is Margaret Thompson, the real Margaret Thompson. I need your help." The irony wasn't lost on me. Margaret Thompson had been my undercover identity when infiltrating Sarah's murder network. Now the real Margaret Thompson was calling because her own daughter-in-law was following Sarah's playbook exactly. "Tell me what's happening, Margaret. My son's wife has been giving me vitamins that make me dizzy. She's pushing for a family cruise next month. And yesterday, I overheard her on the phone saying, 'The old bat won't be a problem much longer.'" Emma, now 9 years old, looked up from her homework and mouthed silently, "Another scared grandparent?" I nodded and mouthed back, "We've got this." Within 6 hours, we had Margaret Thompson in protective custody, her daughter-in-law under surveillance, and enough evidence to prevent what would have been Sarah's legacy, another copycat murder using her exact methods. That evening, as Emma and I sat in our garden watching the sunset, she asked her usual question, "How many grandparents did we save today, Grandma?" "Just one today, sweetheart. But sometimes one is everything." Emma smiled and leaned against my shoulder. "Grandma, I'm glad the bad people tried to hurt you." I was startled. "Why would you say that, Emma?" "Because if they hadn't tried to hurt you, we never would have learned how to save all the other grandparents. Sometimes bad things happen, so good things can happen later." I hugged her tightly, marveling at the wisdom that had grown from such darkness. "You're absolutely right, little one." The Emma Whitmore Foundation had now prevented over 100 murders. Sarah and David would spend their lives in prison, but their attempted murder had created something far more powerful than their greed ever could have destroyed. Emma fell asleep in my arms as the stars came out over our garden. Tomorrow, there would be more scared grandparents to help, more families to protect, more justice to serve. But tonight, there was just a grandmother and granddaughter who had survived the worst humanity could offer and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to let evil win. And we had won completely.